Hello. This video is meant to be a brief reminder for people who have attended my time management workshop, The Time of Your Life, of some of the key points that we discussed, and in particular relating to the urgency and importance grid. As you'll remember, the first thing we talked about was the distinction between urgency and importance. By urgency, we mean those things which have a deadline attached to them. That is to say, they're time-bound and need to be done by a particular time. But urgency actually tells us nothing about the importance of an activity, which is related to the value it adds to things that we really want to achieve. And yet we consistently confuse the two and treat urgent things as though they're important, whether or not they are. And if we accept that distinction, then we can see that any task we face can be placed in one of the four quadrants on this matrix. So there'll be some tasks that are both urgent and important. There'll be some that are urgent, but relatively speaking less important. There'll be some tasks that are important, but are less urgent, or even not urgent at all if they have no deadline attached. And there'll be some that are neither urgent nor important. So let's start to populate that a little bit. Let's think about an academic role in a university. So for an academic, things like writing a grant application will be both important, because it will enable the research to go ahead, and urgent, it will have a deadline attached. Likewise, giving a lecture, there'll be a room full of students waiting for the lecture, so it's urgent. And of course, it's at the heart of the academic project, so it's also important. And likewise, a meeting with a major industrial sponsor, for example. And indeed, most crises also fit this urgency and importance box. However, there'll be lots of other things that are urgent, but relatively speaking less important. They include things like, well, most of the interruptions we face, most of the emails that clamour for our attention, most of the administrative tasks we have to do, and so on and so on. In fact, a well-functioning bureaucracy like a university can generate an almost endless list of urgent, but relatively speaking, less important activities with which we can fill our days. But perhaps the most difficult quadrant to engage with is the next one. The one that's full of things that are really important, that will add real value to what we're trying to do, but are not urgent or not yet. They might include things like research, professional reading to stay up to date, staying fit, building relationships, planning, and writing. All of these are easy to defer if there's no deadline attached. And yet they're a very important part of the academic role. And then of course there's a fourth quadrant. This is the one that's neither urgent nor important and has things like, well, displacement activities, things we do when we don't want to get on with our work. You know, surfing the web, having another cup of coffee, that kind of stuff. Most of us are too busy for most of this, but if you do find you're indulging this a lot, it's worth paying attention to and trying to change. But what's really interesting is how we then respond to this, having done the analysis. Because if I'm being really good, here's what happens. I sit down at my desk and I start work on the most important and urgent thing that faces me. And then I work down that agenda of important and urgent tasks, never noticing when I cross the line and I'm in fact dealing with urgent trivia. And I get to the end of the day and I think, oh bother, the one thing I really wanted to do that was really important but not urgent, my research say, I never found time for today. Never mind, I think, maybe tomorrow. And then tomorrow, of course, I come in, I sit down at my desk, I start working on the most urgent and important tasks that face me, I work through the list, never noticing when I cross the line, dealing with things of increasing trivia, and I get to the end of the day, and I think, oh no, perhaps next week. And so it goes on. And that's if I'm being good. If I'm being less good, I do something slightly less canny. I sit down at my desk, I look at the most urgent and important thing facing me, and I think, that's a bit big and difficult. I know, before I do that, I'll just... And the minute we say, I'll just to ourselves, we dive into the trivia, and we get through loads and loads of urgent stuff that's actually not very important. And we think, gosh, how busy I've been today. Look at all the trivia I've shifted. And towards the end of the day, we suddenly think, gosh, I really must get on with this urgent and important things, my grant application or dealing with this crisis or whatever it is. And we tend to get those things done because they are urgent, they are important, but maybe they're done in a rush, maybe without quite the quality we wanted. And of course, we still don't make time for what we really wanted to get on with, which was our research. And the tragedy is, things that are left in that quadrant of important but not urgent for too long, because one of two things will happen. Either the deadline will creep up on us and suddenly we'll run around shouting, crisis, crisis, because it's now urgent and important, even though we've known for maybe 4 years that the research excellence framework was coming up. Or, which is sadder still, the thing falls off the agenda the other side, and that one piece of writing, that one book, that one article that could have made a real difference to our discipline never gets written because we've been too busy. So how do we deal with these 4 quadrants? What's our strategy to be? We talked about this at length on the workshop, but in brief, here's a summary. For the things that are both important and urgent, we need to plan well and we need to do them now. For things that are urgent but relatively speaking less important, we've got 4 things we can do. We can delegate them, if we're lucky enough to have someone to delegate to. We can defer them to do them at a time of our choosing, rather than interrupting important work to do them. We can dump some, just not do them at all. There are some emails which, if they're not answered, it really doesn't matter. Or if we must do them, we can do them quick and dirty. That is to say, to the lowest acceptable standard. Because any time we spend on them over and above that is time stolen from important activities, which way we should be spending our time. And then for that difficult quadrant of the stuff that's important and not urgent, here's where we really need to plan well. Often we may need to break these into smaller tasks so that we can import them little by little into the important and urgent quadrant by setting a short-term deadline and delivering that. And if we do that over a period of time, we accomplish big goals without stress. And finally, we've got the stuff that's neither urgent nor important. Of course, you could choose just not to do this, but often it's fun and sometimes it has some value. So my strategy here is to treat these things as rewards. When you've done a really important bit of work, you've worked hard and you've accomplished something, that's when you treat yourself. Maybe to 5 minutes surfing the web for interesting stuff, or having that extra cup of coffee that you promised yourself. So I hope that's been a helpful reminder. I'm always interested in feedback on these video clips, and of course any questions you've got, I'd certainly welcome those. You can leave comments on my blog, or email me, or phone me, or catch me when I'm around your institution. I look forward to hearing from you. Thanks for listening.